Have you ever trusted someone, only to realize later that every word they said was a carefully constructed lie? The most dangerous betrayal doesn't come from enemies. It comes from those who pretend to care. If you've ever asked, "How did I not see it coming?" this video might give you the clarity you never knew you needed. Trust isn't just fragile, it's sacred. It's the silent agreement between two hearts that says, "I've got you." But when someone shatters that trust, especially with a lie that's been sculpted to sound comforting, it doesn't just hurt. It changes you. If you've ever experienced that sickening moment, that sinking in your gut when you realize someone close to you was never really honest, you're not alone. That moment feels like emotional whiplash. One second you're safe, the next you're spinning. And here's the unsettling truth. Liars don't always wear red flags. In fact, the most dangerous ones, they're usually the most charming. They disarm you with a smile, slip into your circle with warmth, and ask questions that seem harmless, even caring. But those questions, they're not just words, they're traps, precisely designed to disarm you and map out your weaknesses. They're not conversations, they're covert operations, and if you miss the signs, you won't even see the betrayal coming, not until it's already done its damage. That's why in this video, I'm exposing 5 specific questions manipulative people use to build fake connection, all while secretly pulling the strings behind the curtain. These tactics aren't loud. They're subtle, strategic, and heartbreakingly common in relationships, at work, even during everyday chats. So if you've ever asked yourself, "How did I not notice this sooner?" then keep watching, because each question I'm about to reveal builds on the last. Together, they form a chilling blueprint, showing you exactly how liars construct trust, only to weaponize it later. This isn't just about spotting deception. It's about reclaiming clarity, self-trust, and emotional control. The kind of power Stoic philosophy has taught for centuries. Calm in chaos, strength through awareness. You're not weak. You're not naive. You're just about to see what they never wanted you to notice. So before we dive into the 5 questions, hit that subscribe button if you're done being manipulated and ready to trust yourself more than anyone else. Now, let's begin with the root of deception. Why do people lie? Contrary to what we want to believe, people don't lie just because they're cruel. Most of the time they lie because they're scared. Scared of losing control, scared of rejection, scared of being exposed. Fear is the #1 trigger. Some lie to avoid consequences. Some lie to keep a crumbling relationship afloat. Others lie to protect an image they've carefully built, even if it's fake. And sometimes the lie doesn't even start out as malicious, but lies snowball. And eventually, the person becomes more loyal to their fiction than to the people around them. By the time you uncover the truth, you're no longer dealing with someone who's just afraid. You're facing someone who's willing to hurt you, just to avoid facing themselves. Then, there's the lie rooted in control. These people don't lie out of panic. They lie with precision. They manipulate facts to shift blame, sow confusion, and bend reality in their favor. Their goal isn't connection, it's dominance. Every word is a chess move. Every omission is strategic, and the damage, it's psychological. You begin questioning your memory, your instincts, your reality. That's not accidental. That's the plan. Finally, there are those who lie because they've built their entire identity on falsehood. Narcissists, for example, don't just want love, they crave worship. And when reality threatens their perfect image, they twist the truth without hesitation. They need you to believe them. They feel entitled to special treatment. And they lie to protect that illusion at all costs. People with antisocial traits lie effortlessly. Not because they're afraid, but because they feel nothing. No guilt, no remorse, no empathy. To them, lying is just a tool, a way to manipulate, escape consequences, and win. They can appear charming, even likable at first glance. But beneath the surface, they're completely disconnected from the emotional damage they cause. The harm they inflict isn't accidental. It's simply irrelevant. Understanding why people lie doesn't make those lies any less dangerous. In fact, it sharpens your awareness. It helps you realize not everyone who speaks kindly has kind intentions. Some people are so skilled at hiding the truth, you don't realize you're being manipulated until the damage is done. But no matter how polished they are, manipulators always leave clues, especially in the questions they ask. If someone asks you one of these 5 specific questions, stop and think. They might not be seeking the truth. They're seeking control. Let's start with the first one. Don't you trust me? When you begin to understand the deeper motives behind lies, whether it's fear, control, or a broken sense of self, you start to notice the patterns in how manipulators operate. But spotting the lie is only half the battle. The harder part? Recognizing how it feels while it's happening. Because manipulation rarely arrives like a slap in the face. It comes wrapped in guilt, in subtle emotional pressure, in quiet little hooks that make you question yourself more than the person in front of you. And one of the most common and most insidious phrases in this game is just 3 words. Don't you trust me? At first it sounds innocent, even hurt, like something someone would say when they feel misunderstood. But look closer. That question isn't about connection. It's a demand for your compliance. It's not about seeking truth. It's about silencing your doubt. Picture this. You're already feeling unsure. Your gut is telling you something doesn't add up. So you ask a reasonable question, calmly, respectfully. But instead of a clear answer, you get a wounded look. And that loaded question. Suddenly, the conversation shifts. It's no longer about the facts. It's about you, your suspicion, your apparent lack of trust. And just like that, you feel like the villain for simply asking a question. This is emotional blackmail. At its quietest, it's a calculated tactic designed to prey on your core instincts, the need to keep peace, to be seen as kind, to avoid conflict. And the more thoughtful, empathetic, or harmony-seeking you are, the more likely you are to bend under that pressure. You tell yourself, maybe I'm overthinking it. Maybe I was too harsh just for asking. And so you let it slide. You go quiet. And they get exactly what they wanted. Your hesitation, your self-doubt, your silence, your permission. But Stoic philosophy offers a completely different path. Epictetus once said, if someone succeeds in provoking you, realize that your mind is complicit. It's a brutal truth, but also a liberating one, because it reminds us manipulation only works if we allow it to, if we give up the reins of our own judgment. A Stoic doesn't let emotional pressure override their reason. When they hear, "Don't you trust me?" they don't fall for the guilt trip. They stay grounded in what they know. Because trust isn't something you demand. It's something you earn. Trust isn't something you force. It's something that grows, slowly, through truth, not emotional pressure. And yet, one of the most dangerous traps people fall into, especially good-hearted, well-intentioned people, is confusing trust with silence, with obedience, with blind acceptance. They believe that asking questions means causing offense, that setting boundaries equals starting conflict. But here's the truth most people avoid. Refusing to ask hard questions when something feels wrong isn't kindness. It's self-neglect. And that neglect often stems from fear. Fear of being labeled difficult. Fear of disrupting the peace. Fear of creating tension or ruining the moment. But here's the thing. That fear, that's exactly what manipulators count on. It's the crack in the wall they slip through, the doorway they quietly walk in. So what's the answer? It's not confrontation just for the sake of drama. And it's not becoming cold or emotionally distant either. It's calm clarity. It's the grounded strength to stay centered even when someone tries to back you into a corner with emotion. It's the ability to respond, not with guilt, not with apology, and not with anger, but with quiet truth. Trust is earned through clarity, not guilt, not pressure, not shame. That one sentence alone can shift an entire power dynamic. It brings the responsibility back to where it belongs, on actions, not feelings. It breaks the emotional manipulation without starting a war. It preserves your peace without closing your heart, and that is the essence of Stoic wisdom. Never let someone else's emotions steer your decisions. Don't let their guilt become your compass. Don't let their tears become your logic. Don't let their urgency override your clarity. That quiet center inside you, your judgment, your reason, that's your true guide. If someone tries to hijack that with shame or emotional pressure, don't take it as a sign to surrender. Take it as a signal. This is where you stand firm. You don't have to be cold to be strong. You don't have to be suspicious to be wise. But you do need to stop giving people the benefit of the doubt when your gut and the facts are telling you something's off. Stoicism doesn't teach you to assume the worst in others. It teaches you to see clearly, to respond with reason, not reactivity. And most of all, to remember this: your peace is not something you owe anyone. It's something you protect, especially from those who try to buy your silence with guilt. Now we move to the second manipulative question on the list. Why would I lie? At first, it sounds like a fair question, reasonable, logical, even innocent. But make no mistake, this question is one of the most manipulative tricks in the liar's playbook. Because why would I lie isn't asked to gain clarity. It's asked to make you doubt yourself. It's not the beginning of a conversation, it's the end of one. It's meant to shut down your instincts before they can speak up. And the problem? It works, far too often, especially on people who genuinely don't want to think badly of others. People who search for logic and want to believe in good intentions. That's the trap. It plays on a false sense of logic and leads to very real emotional consequences. When someone asks, "Why would I lie?" what they're really doing is deflecting. They're shifting the spotlight away from their behavior and pointing it at your judgment. It's a rhetorical sleight of hand. It suggests that honesty is obvious, simply because they've always been honest, or because they seem like they have no reason to lie. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Deception doesn't always come with obvious motives. People don't always lie for reasons that are visible or rational to you. They lie to protect their ego. They lie to avoid consequences. They lie to maintain control over a narrative. Sometimes they lie just because it's what they've always done, because they assume you won't ask again. And that assumption, it's where they win. Picture this. A man sits across the table from an insurance agent. The agent looks calm, confident, even warm. He smiles as he says he's been in the business for over 30 years. His voice is steady, reassuring. He explains that the policy is simple, no hidden fees, nothing to worry about. But when the client hesitates and asks for a bit more clarity, the agent leans back, folds his arms, and softly says, "Why would I lie? My entire career has been built on trust." It's smooth, disarming, slightly offended. The message is clear. If you question me, you're insulting me. And the client, wanting to appear respectful, not paranoid, lets it go. He signs the contract. Weeks later, a second look at the paperwork reveals a clause buried deep in the fine print. A clause that changes everything, making the deal far less favorable than it first appeared. By then, the damage is done, but the worst part? It's not just the money lost, it's the betrayal. The realization that your instincts were right. But you chose to silence them because someone made you feel like asking questions was disrespectful. That's the danger of false logic. Just because someone says they have no reason to lie doesn't mean they're telling the truth. The truth is not based on how confident or likable someone seems. It's based on facts, on evidence, on present actions, not a polished resume or a carefully crafted backstory. And that's where Stoicism becomes your shield. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." It's a direct, almost cold call to integrity. But more importantly, it reminds us where to place our trust. Not in personality, not in charm, but in the truth itself. A Stoic doesn't get distracted by someone's reputation or charisma. A Stoic asks, "Is this true right now? Does this match reality? Can I verify this myself?" That kind of thinking cuts through emotional noise. It clears the fog of manipulation and restores your ability to think clearly. It gives you the quiet courage to question what feels off, even if the person seems trustworthy. Especially when they do. One of the biggest mental traps people fall into is assuming that if there's no clear reason for someone to lie, then there must be no lie at all. But people aren't always logical. Some lie instinctively. Some lie to avoid even minor discomfort. And some lie just to see if they can get away with it. So if you're waiting for a good enough reason to be skeptical, you've already handed over your judgment to their story. That's not wisdom. That's wishful thinking. Now, to be clear, this doesn't mean walking through life with constant suspicion. Stoicism isn't about cynicism or closing your heart. It's about clarity. It's about not mistaking confidence for proof. It's about knowing that a calm, honest question isn't disrespectful. It's essential. And if someone responds to your question with guilt-tripping, deflection, or evasiveness, you've already received your answer, not the one they spoke, but the one they revealed. Here's something to sit with. Honest people don't mind being questioned. They welcome it because they have nothing to hide. Only the dishonest feel threatened by scrutiny. So the next time someone looks you in the eye and says, "Why would I lie?" Take a breath, pause, stay grounded, and remember, it's not your job to prove they would lie. It's their job to prove they're telling the truth. And if they can't do that, without getting defensive, manipulative, or evasive, you have every right to dig deeper, ask harder questions, and protect yourself. Have you ever been guilt-tripped into trusting someone only to later discover they weren't being honest? What tipped you off? And what would you do differently now? Drop your story in the comments. I read everyone. Let's talk about it. Because your story might be the very thing that helps someone else recognize the trap before it costs them their peace, their integrity, or their time. And remember this, trust is not a feeling, it's a pattern. And if something feels off, check the facts. Don't rely on smiles, tone, or promises. Stoics never put their faith in appearances. They put it in truth. Now let's move to manipulation tactic number 3. Can you keep a secret? At first glance, it sounds harmless, even warm. A soft voice, a glance over the shoulder, like you're being invited into something special, a private world reserved for only a chosen few. It feels like intimacy, like trust, like connection. But sometimes, this isn't an invitation. It's a trap. Can you keep a secret? What that phrase often creates is an invisible contract, one you never actually agreed to, but now feel pressured to uphold. And the danger of that moment isn't just the secret itself. It's in the unspoken obligation. The psychological bind that starts tightening the moment you nod. That question bypasses your values. It doesn't ask, should you keep this secret? It assumes you will. It assumes your silence. It shifts the burden onto your loyalty, not your judgment. And suddenly, you're no longer being confided in. You're being recruited. You're being pulled into something you didn't choose, bound not by consent, but by emotional weight. Because once a secret is shared under the illusion of closeness, it often comes with subtle pressure. You owe me. We're in this together. If you speak up, you're betraying me. And that's where the manipulation hides, not in the words themselves, but in the psychological tension they create. Let's take Rachel, for example. She worked in a small, tight-knit office where everything felt casual, friendly, and personal. One afternoon, a colleague pulled her aside, speaking in a hushed tone. "I need to tell you something serious, but only if you promise not to tell anyone." Out of curiosity and politeness, Rachel said yes. And then came the secret. Her co-worker confessed that their boss had been misusing company funds and covering it up. This wasn't office gossip. It was a serious ethical violation, and now Rachel was trapped. She had promised silence, but the silence came at a cost: her integrity. Speaking up would mean betraying someone she saw every day. Staying quiet would mean becoming complicit in something she knew was wrong. That single question, "Can you keep a secret?" had cornered her. And it's a dynamic far too many people recognize, because this form of manipulation doesn't use force. It uses false intimacy. It preys on your desire to be trustworthy. It makes silence feel like loyalty. And for people who value harmony and connection, that pressure can feel almost impossible to resist. But here's a truth few people say out loud: not every secret deserves to be kept. And just because someone demands loyalty doesn't mean they're worthy of it. The Stoics understood this deeply. Seneca once wrote, "No evil propensity of the human heart is so powerful that it may not be subdued by discipline." In modern terms, no matter how strong the pull to protect someone else's wrongdoing, you always have the power to choose differently. But that choice takes discipline. It takes clarity. And it takes the courage to feel uncomfortable in the name of what's right. Stoicism doesn't tell you to become cold or emotionally closed off. It teaches you how to protect your ethical boundaries, even when someone tries to blur them with closeness. Rachel's mistake wasn't in caring. It wasn't in listening. It was in letting a whispered request override her values. Rachel's mistake wasn't in listening. It was in how quickly she pledged loyalty to someone who hadn't earned her trust. And the cost wasn't scandal. It was something far more quiet and corrosive: the erosion of her own inner peace. She agreed too quickly. She gave her loyalty to someone who had never earned it. Rachel mistook confidentiality for complicity. And the price she paid wasn't a public fallout. It was months of anxiety, quiet guilt, and the slow unraveling of her own sense of integrity. The lesson she eventually learned was simple, but not easy. Before you promise to keep a secret, ask yourself one thing: does this align with my values? If the answer is no, you owe no one your silence, especially not someone who tries to buy it with a whisper. This is exactly the kind of inner discipline the Stoics trained for. It's the ability to pause in real time, see through the fog of emotional pressure, and act not from impulse, but from principle. When someone tries to involve you in a secret that feels wrong, you don't owe them protection. You owe yourself honesty. You owe yourself peace of mind. And you owe the truth its rightful place in the light, because when so-called loyalty asks you to betray your values, it's not loyalty anymore. It's manipulation. And the most powerful thing you can do in that moment is simply and quietly say no. Here's a thought worth sitting with. People who are honest don't mind being questioned. They welcome it because they have nothing to hide. Only those who deceive feel threatened by scrutiny. So the next time someone throws that line at you, "Why would I lie?" Take a breath. Pause. Hold your ground. And remember this: it's not your job to prove they would lie. It's their job to prove they're telling the truth. And if they can't do that, without guilt-tripping, defensiveness, or diversion, you have every right to dig deeper. Ask tougher questions and protect yourself. Have you ever been guilted into trusting someone only to later discover they weren't being honest? What was the moment that tipped you off? And if you could go back, what would you do differently? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because your story might be exactly what helps someone else recognize the red flags before it costs them. And always remember, trust is not a feeling, it's a pattern. And if you're not sure, check the facts. Stoics don't place their faith in appearances, they place it in truth. Now let's move on to the fourth manipulative question. Who told you that? Have you ever noticed that when you confront someone with an uncomfortable truth, their first reaction isn't to address what you said, but to demand, "Who told you that?" That's not curiosity. That's not confusion. That's control. That question is a tactical move designed to flip the script, not to clarify the truth, but to discredit it. The conversation is no longer about the facts. It's about surveillance. It becomes a game of tracing loyalties, tracking who's talking, and making you feel like the guilty one just for knowing what you know. This psychological trick is more common than people realize, especially when the person being confronted has something to hide. Instead of addressing the issue, they immediately deflect. They don't want to talk about what was said. They want to know who said it. The moment you hear, "Who told you that?" you're no longer in a conversation about truth. You're in a game of misdirection, and it works. That's because it plants doubt. Suddenly you question yourself. You wonder if you crossed a line by listening to something you weren't supposed to hear. But here's the reality. The person trying to shift the spotlight away from the truth is usually the one standing on unstable ground, no matter how calmly or confidently they ask that question. It's a mask. A tactic. A calculated way to avoid responsibility for something they likely already know is wrong. Think about a public example like Lance Armstrong. For years, he dominated professional cycling. For years, Lance Armstrong was revered as a symbol of perseverance, a cancer survivor turned champion who dominated the world of professional cycling. But behind the scenes, persistent whispers kept resurfacing, rumors of performance-enhancing drug use, allegations, testimonies, suspicious patterns. Yet whenever questioned, Armstrong rarely addressed the evidence head-on. Instead, he turned his spotlight elsewhere. He attacked the sources, questioned the motives, and painted whistleblowers as enemies. Who's saying this? That became his armor. And for a long time, it worked. People hesitated. They were afraid of being wrong. They didn't want to accuse without perfect proof. And so, they got pulled into the drama of who said what, instead of staying grounded in the one question that mattered most. Is it true? That's the real danger of this manipulation tactic. It doesn't just distract you, it confuses your moral compass. It pulls focus away from truth and redirects it toward the politics of knowledge, turning a moral dilemma into a loyalty test. And for those caught in the middle, it creates fog. Suddenly, you're no longer asking whether something is right or wrong. You're questioning whether you're even allowed to know what you know. You stop trusting your instincts. You start wondering if the problem isn't the lie, but the fact that you heard it. But Stoic philosophy offers a clear path through this kind of psychological fog. Epictetus once wrote, "Seek not the favor of the multitude. It is seldom got by honest and lawful means." In simple terms, Those who live with integrity don't obsess over who said what. They don't scramble to track down informants. They don't play PR games with the truth. They confront what's in front of them with clarity, not chaos. Stoicism teaches us this. Truth stands on its own. It doesn't need to be whispered. It doesn't need to be hidden behind layers of secrecy. It doesn't crumble just because it came from an inconvenient source. So when someone responds with, "Who told you that?" they're revealing their priority, not truth, not repair, control. They want to manage perception, not take responsibility. That question becomes their shield, their distraction, their delay tactic. And the Stoic response? Don't follow the detour. Stay rooted. Stand still. Don't argue with emotion. Respond with clarity. Let's focus on whether it's true, not who said it. Because at the end of the day, character isn't revealed by how someone acts when they're praised. It's revealed in how they react when they're questioned. When truth backs them into a corner, do they face it? Or do they start looking for someone else to blame? That's a test every one of us will face at some point. And when that moment comes, your job isn't to trace sources or defend your right to ask. Your job is to hold the line, to stay composed, to demand substance over spin. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever confronted someone with truth, only for them to dodge responsibility by obsessing over how you found out? What did you do in that moment? And what do you wish you had said instead? Share your story in the comments, because your insight might be exactly what helps someone else hold their ground when it matters most. Now let's move to the fifth manipulative question. Don't you remember? What happens when someone insists that you said or agreed to something you're sure you never did? You pause. You try to recall. You doubt yourself. And in that brief hesitation, they plant the seed of control. Because that seemingly innocent question, "Don't you remember?" can become the gateway to something much darker. Gaslighting. And gaslighting isn't just about rewriting facts. It's about rewiring your trust in your own mind. It doesn't attack your ideas. It attacks your reality. Gaslighting doesn't come at you like a storm. It starts as a whisper, a small crack in certainty, and then uses that crack to wedge open control. Over time, you begin to doubt your own memory. You find yourself deferring to the other person's version of events, not because it's logical, but because they say it with such absolute conviction. They seem calm, confident. Their details are sharp. They describe the moment as if it were crystal clear. And you feel foggy, uncertain, disconnected from what you thought was real, and that's the trap. This tactic often begins quietly. A partner, a friend, a coworker insists that you agreed to something that clashes with your values, your plans, or your memory. When you question it, they don't lash out. They act surprised, maybe even hurt. They say, "I can't believe you don't remember," with a tone that's both soft and firm. And that calm reaction, it sends a message. The problem isn't me, it's you. As you dig through your memories looking for evidence, your hesitation becomes their opportunity. They don't just challenge your version of the past, they replace it. A new false narrative takes root. They make themselves out to be the stable one, the rational one, while you start to look and feel like the emotional, forgetful one. But none of it is accidental. The more they make you question your own perception, the more they train you to rely on theirs. Because the goal isn't simply to win the argument, it's to take control of your reality. Let's take a common example. You're in a long-term relationship. One day, your partner says, "We agreed you'd quit your job and move cities with me." You freeze. You have zero recollection of that conversation. In fact, you're almost certain you would have pushed back on it. But instead of opening a dialogue, they insist you not only agreed, you were enthusiastic. They recall the date, the room you were in, even the clothes you were wearing. Their story is filled with detail, but you feel completely disconnected from it. And still you start to question yourself. Did I forget? Did I zone out? Am I overreacting? No, what you're feeling isn't forgetfulness. It's psychological pressure. If this pattern keeps repeating, the emotional toll multiplies. Eventually, you stop pushing back. You stop asking questions. You go quiet, not because you agree, but because you no longer trust your own voice in the room. This is where Stoic philosophy becomes a lifeline, not by fighting fire with fire, but by building inner clarity and discipline. Marcus Aurelius once said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." In the context of gaslighting, that means one thing. No one else has the right to rewrite your reality. Your mind, your perception, your memory, that's your territory. And the moment you surrender that to someone else, you lose more than clarity. You lose your sovereignty. The Stoic doesn't chase validation. They don't crumble in the face of another person's certainty. They stay grounded in what they know, and when their memory gets hazy, they turn to evidence, notes, calendars, direct experiences, not emotion, not drama, because the goal isn't to argue over who's right, it's to stay connected to what's real. This mindset takes effort. You have to slow down your emotional reactions. You have to build habits that protect your perception. Write things down. Confirm verbal agreements in writing. Reflect often so your thoughts aren't easily rewritten. These aren't habits of paranoia. They're habits of self-respect. So that when someone tries to shake your sense of what's true, you have something stronger than emotion to lean on. And most importantly, remember this. Just because someone speaks with confidence doesn't mean they speak the truth. Some people learn to use confidence as a weapon. They know that tone can override facts. That repetition can rewrite memory. But a Stoic sees through the act. A Stoic doesn't raise their voice to match another. They don't react emotionally to emotional bait. They return to principle, to clarity, to self-trust. Gaslighting only works when you believe someone else sees your life more clearly than you do. But they don't. They never did. And the moment you reclaim control over your awareness, your discipline, your reflection, you reclaim your power, not just for today, but for your mind and your life. If you've made it this far, then you already know. Liars don't just tell lies. They ask questions designed to confuse you, to make you doubt, to drag you into their version of the story, while slowly, quietly rewriting yours. These 5 questions may seem harmless at first glance, but now you see them for what they are. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. The true power isn't in exposing them. It's in protecting yourself, choosing awareness over confusion, calm over chaos, truth over emotional traps. You don't need to make a scene. Just stay grounded, stay sharp. You are no one's pawn, and your mind is not up for negotiation. So next time someone throws one of these questions at you, pause, breathe, and remember what you learned here. You're not just surviving manipulation, you're rising above it. If this video helped you wake up, remember something, or finally connect the dots, hit that subscribe button. Join this space where we speak truth, sharpen instincts, and reclaim our lives. One quiet realization at a time, because when trust breaks, it's hard to rebuild. But self-trust, that's the foundation for everything. Stay strong, stay aware, and I'll see you in the next one.